Chapter 74 is a good example of why Elentier is very hard to predict right now, at least for me, just from the fact that we don't really have any connection points like forward into the story of what can happen, because we don't know how any other characters are going to get there. The only people that are on their way that we don't know how they're going to get there, but we know they're going to get there at some point, are the members of Diablos. And how is that going to play out? Are they going to end up being an ally to the main cast, or are they just going to go back, like, continuously be another enemy for Fairy Tail and Co. to run into during these, during the 100 Years quest? Regardless of which, like, the only other point right now that we have going into the future right now of Elentier is that Ferris and Toka went to go talk to this, like, grand whiteout priestess. So that's still something that is on the way. But outside of those things, like, there's not a lot of kind of other character positions and points and stories that can just, like, run into this. And, it's very hard to have, like, oh, well, they're going to fight Alderaan, but also Ferris was, doing her thing. And so you're able to have those two plot points connect and bring in characters to help them fight against the God Seeds and whatnot, and to fight against members of Diablos. You don't really have that right now, and that's obviously the weird part. And being another dimension, like, even the idea of, I would imagine, of Ignia coming over to Elentier can't happen, so that power-up is out of the way. Because it was always one of those things that was a question with Alderaan. Obviously, it didn't happen, but it was always like, if something is, like, dire, would Ignia show up again to try and force Natsu to power up? Or, like, what would Ignia's take be? Like, why did he show up the first time, but, like, why wouldn't he show up later? Like, what? Just giving him, like, the opportunity to do that was always, like, made it, like, very, very unsure of this inevitable potential event that can happen at the end of an arc. But now it's not there. Because, I don't know, it's one of those things where it's set up in the future. We know he wants that, but the plot point can't be overused, and obviously we can't just have him show up and force Natsu into this tremendously, like, more powerful state in order to demolish his opponent. I actually really wish that Mashima switched it and did that with Alderaan instead of Merciful, just so we could see him do that much of a beating to a dragon that big. I think that would have been way crazier to see, but whatever. Just thinking back on it. Anyway, talking about this chapter, I was very happy to see that Natsu, got himself together after a moment, because he was definitely a little shaken of the fact that, like, this was Lucy. Because when Hakune made the fake Lucy out of ice, that obviously didn't do anything to Natsu, because, it doesn't smell like Lucy, doesn't feel like anything like her, so he didn't, it doesn't bother him. Whereas this is actually her switched over. And this is one of the reasons I think that Celine is the one that was giving Ferris the power to kind of take control of people. Because it's not like they're directly just mind-controlled zombies. It's like you're altering just a couple aspects in their brain and the way they think to make them kind of, evil versions of themselves, is a better description of it. And not even entirely, because, like, Lucy seems way more like that, like this more evil version of herself. And you got a little bit with, like, Lisana and stuff. But with, like, Laxus, we saw Laxus still acting like himself when he was fighting Kyria and whatnot. So I always believed, especially after that point of her losing control over members of Fairy Tail, that it was actually Celine's power that was going to Ferris, and she just cut it off. So we're seeing it, like, way more in effect here. But Lucy is now in this snake form. She's like this, a wet woman, like this serpentine kind of creature. Kind of like a Lamia. I'm wondering what the general difference otherwise than, like, the apparent affinity to water. Because when I saw the raws, I actually assumed it was acid she was, like, throwing, because I thought snake's acid. I was like, oh yeah, makes more sense with, like, Lucy, who does have a degree of water magic, and a water snake is a thing. So it kind of tied together in reality when I thought about it, instead of just giving her a different power. But once she was actually fighting Natsu, I was happy to see Natsu kind of get into, like, a state of normalcy for him, because when it comes to Lucy, like obviously he's never actually fought her. Like he mentions it in this part. Like, Lucy wanted to have a scuffle with him right after like the time skip going into the Avatar arc, but they didn't. And we know Lucy got significantly more powerful. Not as powerful as Natsu, but still enough that that she was confident she could do anything against him, and it still showed that she was confident in her own strength as well. But like Natsu was obviously way more powerful, and he's more powerful here. But I think the odd fact that this is still Lucy, that he doesn't want to do much to her, because he starts out bare bones abilities. Like he immediately, like he's just at Fire Dragon's Iron Fist. He's at his most basic move, because he's gonna start small and work his way up as he's been doing, way more kind of intelligently fighting, kind of gauging his level with his opponent. And he actually goes Lightning Flame Dragon mode, which is again really impressive, because Lucy did a good job against him. And granted, she's been powered up with like the spiritual arts, with like they just say spirit power in this chapter, but that's still like this version of Lucy has to be like the strongest we've seen her. If Natsu is taking her as seriously as he was taking Gajil, keep that in mind, because Natsu again goes to match his level and his output with his opponent. That's why when Gajil went to his Iron Shadow Dragon mode, Natsu went into his Lightning Flame Dragon mode. So that really tells you that he does see this Lucy as as somebody he has to put in some more effort against. And she actually does damage against him as well, and actually exploits the fact that that is Lucy, that Natsu would hesitate to actually hit her, like which is kind of fakes being afraid. Natsu hesitates for a moment, and then she just goes in for an attack, drops Aquametria, and that again does damage to him. And I'm wondering exactly if this is gonna lead to Natsu wanting to burn water, as Igneous said, like this fire that can, just instantly overpower water, just be so hot that water doesn't have a chance to even get close to it, sort of thing. Because Natsu's put out high levels of heat, but like the ideas that Ignea was saying is just like the presence of this flame just nopes everything. It just completely nopes out any form of liquid or any form of, I guess, matter, because when you get down to Natsu's fires also hacks. So high temperature hacks on top of general like broken magic, dragon hacks and whatnot, it's going to be really dangerous in the future for him. But I was happy to see that this Lucy was able to do damage, and I'm wondering what the follow-up will be with this is going to like kind of result in for Lucy specifically, because is she going to continue to develop spiritual art powers now that she has spirit power in her body, or is this like just a limited amount of power that she has, and then by the end of it, it's just going to be gone? Because if she's combining her spiritual art with her normal magic, not even counting like her spirits, and granted, this is a buffed version of her, but if she's able to kind of keep this level of power, or at least figure out a way to retain this level of power after, using spiritual arts, this is the strongest like Lucy we've seen. She can do this without even spirits, just cast her own spells. Granted, it's only base Natsu, but that's still a really significant jump for Lucy. Like, I mentioned that Lucy's actually been really high level for a while. If you go back to the Grand Magic Games, Lucy was S-class levels of magic. She was above S-class levels, because Angel and every member of the Ratsion Seis for their arc was confirmed S-class level for like their type of magic. And Angel can only summon 1 gold key and 1 silver key. Grand Magic Games, Lucy could summon 2 gold keys. Then we obviously got stuff like Star Dress, and we see her now and like how powerful she is. And I think her displays in Alvarez, I would legitimately put her somewhere around high Wizard Saint level in terms of strength. If she can do damage to base Natsu and get Natsu push him enough to go into Lightning Flame Dragon mode, she'll be entering legitimately lower levels of Spriggan tier, because we know Natsu can body a summoner in base, like he did it against Nineheart. Nineheart is a Spriggan level summoner, but he doesn't have the durability that Lucy has. He has the just base standard magic amount of durability for his level, and that's why he got completely one shot by Natsu. You have a very high level heavy hitting battle mage against a summoner, and Lucy's only different because she refused to fight like normal summoner, so she actually has built up a very high level of durability and strong resistances to other magics. So if Lucy is able to retain this level, or again, if she's able to, like, once she gets control of Celine's mind control at some point, then she can legitimately be placed at, lower Spriggan levels, if not like closer to the middle. And that's actually, again, really impressive for Lucy when you see like how far she's come and the level of potential she has, because she's definitely still has a long way to go. And we know Mashima is going to make more of these Star Dress mixed combos. The fact she can combine two means that there's a possibility of combining more at a time. And there's also a video I'm planning on talking about. I don't want to go too much into it here, but it's really justified by this video, by this chapter. So I'm happy that I waited a chapter before I ended up putting out. Because I was thinking about putting out the other day, like a couple days ago, but I wanted to wait since we were so close to this chapter, and I'm glad I did, because now I have a good amount extra to talk about in a theory that I'm going to put out. And I haven't done many theories lately, and I really want to get back to them. But also in the chapter, there's a really good point that happened with Gray that hypes me up for the next chapter. And I'll mention that at the end, because I obviously saved my talk about Aquarius until after I talk about Gray. But Gray is like having a part, he's like thinking about like Gray, though he does strip down, and Mashima admitted that he originally made him like to be a fan service for like the female readers and whatnot. Gray gets like shocked when he's he's in public and he takes his shirt off without realizing it, and he literally seems uncomfortable with how they were like tied up and put on display for Celine and her crew. So it's like Gray has this whole thing about stripping, but he doesn't actually he wouldn't fit into actually being a stripper, which I think is actually a really funny note to put in this. It's just like, yeah, just because it happens doesn't mean I want to do it professionally. He just feels awkward around all these people. I mean, I don't blame him. I mean, it was probably really intimidating, the fact that she is like also on top of this ancient dragon that's like strung you up for a piece of furniture. But after that point, Gray's just like thinking about what would happen, and the general times that like mentions Juvia. And again, that's a good point. The fact he mentions Juvia is one of the things that's playing into what I've been thinking about how these fights are going to go. And the whole part with Wendy, I was actually really surprised, not with like Wendy, being turned into like an actual like cute thing instead of Lucy's is a monster robot, but in reality she's also half snake and would probably can eat people. But Wendy's is just like she's like cosplaying like a little cat outfit. But hers behind her, I didn't think of this part at all, of having Carla and Happy be this very gigantic, scary tigers. I was really surprised by that, because I wasn't thinking about that at all and how they were going to play into this. So this part happening, I did really like. I thought this was funny, because I thought Wendy was going to break away from this very quickly. I thought like it'd be like the second she wakes up, she, you see like Irene trying to communicate with her, and maybe, she's what helps shake off Celine's control. Maybe it'll take her a while to do that, because it makes sense of how she could do that and why she would do that. But I guess it would make more sense if it took Irene like a moment, like a couple minutes or whatever, to to cancel out the control, because Irene is canonically obviously not as powerful as Celine. So again, it would check into the canonical kind of scale of where these two women kind of stand. But the fact that Gray talked about Juvia and he's against Wendy in this scene sets up the end perfectly for me. So Gray obviously is not going to want to hurt any of these people. Like, granted that Carla and Happy are giant tigers, I think at most he's going to try and flash freeze them, but he's not going to try and use any of his bigger ice make moves. Like, you might get Hammer or something that can use to be like knock people up, but he's not going to use any of his bladed attacks or any piercing moves or anything that could do like serious damage, I would assume. Just because Natsu is willing to fight Lucy, but Natsu probably in his head likes the idea of, you really think about Natsu, he would like the idea of having a wife that could fight him, because it's very obvious Mashima is doing some of the shipping stuff. We all know who Natsu is going to end up with, and we see signs in this chapter, obviously, with him a little bit embarrassed and him in awkward situations with Lucy. I'd have to look for it. There's a part where Mashima mentions that a girl for Natsu is like one that can like kind of get him flustered and a little embarrassed, because for the most part he's pretty unwavered emotionally for like a lot of parts. It's only like some of his sad personal stuff or if somebody has a really sad backstory, but Natsu doesn't seem to get embarrassed that often or kind of really again shaken, and unless it's like a really serious or dark scene or something really sad, like I said. But it's very obvious what Mashima's doing with that. Whereas now we're going to be getting that with Juvia and Gray, and the fact that Wendy is against Gray means who's left. I'm very excited for these next. I'm hoping 2 to 3 chapters, because we already got a really good fight with her in this arc, in the previous arc, and if we get like a serious one in the next chapter too, it's gonna be hype. But yeah, so like Natsu's not gonna actually try and do much damage to Lucy. I imagine for him it would be, to the books, like a fair fight. He's not going to do anything kind of like overly dangerous or dirty, and then it would just be until like she couldn't fight back anymore. She just, my body won't move, I'm done, and then he's done. He's not going to obviously go for the kill or do anything crazy, but it would make sense if like Natsu would be kind of happy in the idea of fighting Lucy. And I really like the fact that regardless if Lucy scales up to this position later, I assume so. I feel like it would be obvious, but Natsu was respected her strength enough and didn't just see her as this girl that he met years ago that was a complete novice at her magic, and now is somebody that's actually pushing him. And Natsu's a big deal. Natsu is realistically the strongest member of the guild and one of the strongest humans on the planet. Like, Natsu's actually really powerful. And on top of that, he's still getting way stronger. But the thing I really wanted to talk about is the fact that at the very end of the chapter, Aquarius shows up. Now, why is that really, really important? So, one, there's a theory. I'm not going to mention the theory because that's going to come up. I really want to talk about that. I'm not going to make it like anything kind of crazy. I'm just going to bring up a couple panels and talk about a prediction I have that it's going to happen this arc and something for Lucy. But Aquarius showing up is really interesting because we know Lucy doesn't have to have her keys on her in order to summon her spirits. They just have to have the contract, which means I would assume Aquarius hasn't broken her contract with Lucy. So maybe it's like when their key breaks, they can break the contract, or they can keep it all the way up until the point where somebody else finds the key. So like, say Lucy found the key, they would already have the contract, whereas Aquarius, if somebody else found the key and wanted to form a contract with Aquarius, then maybe she has to break the contract with Lucy or something like that. So, because I think that would make sense, because we have seen Lucy has gone to the Star Dress with like the fragment of Aquarius's key, so that some form of link is still there. But Lucy's level of spatial connection now is so strong she doesn't have to have her keys. So Aquarius coming over is again very interesting. And just kind of like the general idea of it, but has a lot of questions of where this encounter is going to lead to, because we know that her key is out there somewhere. We don't know where. We know Brandish seems to be looking for it too, but with Lucy, what plotline is going to kind of run around this? Is Aquarius going to give some form of clue as to it, or is this going to lead into like it doesn't matter about the key because like Lucy is going to be so powerful the keys aren't going to be a thing anymore or something? I don't really know, because I feel like she's got to keep her keys, but maybe it'll be one of those things where it's like, where you have spells, kind of like in Bleach, you have Aikido. There's like just saying the spell, and then, that has a certain power, but if you do the full chant, or actually, there's like a shortened chant, and then there's the full chant, and each one makes it stronger. So maybe Lucy with her keys would maybe cost less magic, or is generally more powerful, but if you take her keys away, she still can summon them freely. But Aquarius showing up is really interesting because now she says that she's going to be fighting Lucy. So that already is going to be really weird, because I would have never thought we would have that as a fight. Even if it's not normal Lucy, the general idea of Lucy fighting Aquarius is going to be so strange. But again, I want to see it. I think it'll be really cool, and I got my fingers crossed heavily on it leading somewhere further for Lucy's strength, because all of them are definitely getting upgrades in Ellen tier. And I mean, like, this Mashima is still doing it, so it's not like it was like some just notice and then a one-time thing with Taurus. Like, this happened again with Lucy. Lucy is just getting it first. Lucy seems to be the one that's most adept at, I would imagine, having her magic on display, because her magic is so different than the other people. Like, the only other one is Urza, but Urza's a little different, because what we know of with for Lucy's, her spirits can summon themselves. So whereas Urza can summon her weapons, Lucy can summon her spirits, but her spirits can also just kind of, like, even in low Lucy's controlled, they can just come over freely. It makes more sense of why Aquarius would be able to kind of pop up than Ursa do anything reliable when you think about it. Because I was trying to, like, think of this different way that her magic is implemented. But I mean, in reality, just the fact that these are fully sentient beings, I guess, is already different than Ursa's summoning weapons. But her showing up to fight Lucy is important, because this means that Natsu is not in this fight. Juvia is going to obviously show up for Gray, and then something, further with the Wendy, Happy, and Carla fight. I'm very curious to know what Gray is going to do, because if, assuming that he and Natsu both get their power-ups, or whatever their advancements in their magic is while they're in Ellen tier, is in the next couple chapters, Natsu's I can, wait for, because Natsu has other stuff coming up. We've already seen 2 pretty interesting things for Natsu's abilities in 100 Years Quest. Like, we saw the Aetherius Dragon Force form with, that he got from Ignia to fight against Merphobia. And if you really want to count the ideas of Ignia's, like, hyping up Dragon Fire to the point where it kind of just can burn anything and everything. And then, his Beta Heaven stuff makes you wonder, like, what is Mashima's plan for that? Because I don't think that Beta Heaven is just going to be a one-off thing. I feel like it has to have some important purpose later. And I still fully believe that even though Natsu was thinking it was thought projection magic, it just had to do with his resistance to soul-based abilities. Because thought projection magic makes it like a hologram and can do stuff, but it's never shown to work entirely at the same way that Natsu did, because he reshaped his soul. I think it was just his soul resistance, because it would make sense for him to have it, being, the way person and being that Zeref made to fight him, similar to Natsu being able to move the time stop. Him being able to resist soul hacks makes sense, because Zeref would want him to be able to counter all of his hacks to beat him. But here we need something for Gray. I really want to know what Gray's advancement is going to be. I'm hoping, honestly, just like Gray getting a more advanced devil form. Like, Gray's only had that devil black coating, and then, like, he's got the different colored eye and stuff. But I really want to get, like, maybe a horn. I've mentioned it before. Maybe some form of, like, cool hair color change or something. And then, like, maybe, like, just being around him. Kind of like how when Natsu goes into higher forms, he's got that AoE of just, like, heat and he's melting stuff. Something like that for Gray, where stuff around him is just freezing without him doing anything. I don't know. Or maybe every time he breathes, something badass like that. But the last thing that I really wanted to talk about was, again, the fact that Natsu is in the fight. Lucy's preoccupied. Wendy's preoccupied. Juvia's over on the way. Carla and Happy have been accounted for. Natsu up against Ursa, I think, is going to be like what Mashima is doing here. And I think that can lead to a really, really good fight opening into the arc. Because it's a fight that everyone's always really wanted to see, like, a full one of. And we just got Laxus versus Urza. So getting Natsu versus Urza, I think, would be really cool. Especially seeing whatever Urza power up in her, like, her spiritual art yokai form they give her. Because with Urza, the thing is, Natsu surpassed Urza a while ago. Like, Natsu is already, like, the strongest member of the guild. Like, the second he enters Dragon Force, he's the strongest member of the guild. I think that he is around level with Laxus and Guild Arts with Fire Dragon King mode, but still probably ultimately weaker than them. But Dragon Force, I do genuinely believe, just based off feats and, like, what we know about Dragon Force and stuff, just Natsu's generally capable of, Dragon Force should be above Laxus and Guild Arts, so he should be above Urza by a significant amount. Like, I think Natsu in Fire Dragon King mode should be able to pretty much beat Urza. Because one of the things that Urza had that was really good to use against Laxus was her sword that had Nazi's fire dragon flames on there. So like that's automatically not going to do anything. So she's already losing one of the really good weapons she used against Laxus. And Nazi's already shown that he can handle Gray's ice because he's going to have a general resistance to cold based abilities by being a fire guy. So Urza I think would have a much harder time against Nazi than she would against Laxus. So this could be one of the only times you really get to have Urza closer to Natsu to have like a really good fight, just because I don't see many like opportunities beyond this that Urza like should be around Natsu's level. Like Natsu already, I'd say, was again a threat to Urza with Fire Dragon King. But I think that Natsu generally can beat her with Fire Dragon King, but Dragon Force again is too much. And Natsu can't go Dragon Force in this fight because he's not going to want to kill her. Obviously, like he's not going to go all out to that level. I'll be really surprised if he does. But Fire Dragon King mode against whatever Urza rolls up with, I think would be a really cool, massive clash, and would be a really good way to start this arc. Because we've had mostly short scuffles, and again, seeing Selene, I've very much enjoyed seeing Selene be very active. I've mentioned that multiple times. That's one of my favorite things about this arc already. Like we're at 74, so we've been in this arc since like 69, 68. I guess you could really count it when Selene first pulled him in. I think that was 68. So we're still only around like 6 or so chapters in this arc, but at the same time, like when we were 6 chapters into Alderaan, like we had the fights kicking off with like different members of Fairytale like controlled by Ferris, as well as like even at the start of this series, like 6 chapters in, we just were getting around like Kyria and stuff. So we should be getting some big stuff on coming, and I think that Urza versus Natsu is really the fight to go, because Aquarius versus the Snake Lucy is going to be, I would imagine, a pretty good fight, because actually another thing, we know that the spirits, like their level of strength is proportionate to whoever summoned them, and Aquarius summoned herself from Lucy, so she should be scaled up to Lucy's strength because she's going off of Lucy's magic still. So that fight should be really even, I would assume, and I'm hoping for at least a full chapter. Maybe a little bit more. You know, I'd be perfectly fine with getting 2 chapters for each of these fights. Get 2 chapters of this, get 2 chapters for like Juvia, Wendy, Carla, and Happy against Gray, and then like 2 to 3 chapters against Natsu and Urza. I think that'd be really cool. It sounds long to think about, because what is that? 7 chapters, and that's 14 weeks. Like what is that? Like, oh my god, what, like 4.5 months? Actually, really long to think about it, but I do think that would be a really sick way to open the arc. Like, does anybody disagree with me of getting like a really cool fight of Natsu versus? I'm fine even if it's 2 chapters, or maybe if you do like a chapter and a half for the first 2 fights, and then do 3 chapters for Natsu versus Urza. That'd still be like what, like 6? That's still good. Wait, what did Aeon say? Did I completely do numbers wrong? No. It's by week, because I said 2, 2, and 3. Yeah, 7. I was. Whenever I have like some like basic thought fumble like that, I always gotta go back, because those are the worst ones to miss. If you say something wrong, just really bad. Like whenever I watch somebody mess up a character's name in a video without realizing it, those are like the same ones. So if you called like just a character a wrong name, and it's such a easily passed by fumble. It's always really funny. But those are the ones, if I can catch myself, I'll always fix it. But yeah, tell me what your thoughts are about that, like in the comments. I think that would be a really hype way just to get this arc going, as well as it would be, again, answering to a fight everyone's always really wanted, like Natsu versus Urza. One of the ones I'm still really wanting, I'm hoping that Mashima still does, is Laxus versus Jalal. I still gotta make my video on that, but at the same time, Mashima's been teasing it even longer, and we even had like a canonical face-off between them, for at least for a moment, so it's in his head. Maybe we'll get it one day. I don't know about it this arc, because I still have my predictions that Selene might pull people into this arc, but I don't think it would be really convenient if she got brought Laxus and Jalal. But other than that, I guess it would depend on the context. But anyway, other than that, they'll comment below. Tell me your thoughts about this chapter, and tell me your thoughts about where this is going. And I really appreciate if you thumbs up the video, from the like button, subscribe button, check out my other videos. Rather than that, I appreciate everyone's ever subscribed. Thank you all for listening. Bye.